Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us again here at the Push for Empowered Pregnancy Facebook page. I'm Anna Vick, and I have with me tonight, of course, Samantha, our Executive Director, and our special guest tonight is Jill Lens, who is actually a lawyer as well as a lost mother. And we're going to go around and do our introduction. So I already said who I am. I'm also, of course, a stillbirth mother. I'm Owen's mother, and I have 2 living children as well. And I'm a part of PUSH as far as the organization. I'm the co-director of awareness, and I just volunteer all the time. I'm here to help with anything you guys need. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll be facilitating, trying to bring in some questions live. So let us know if you have any questions about legal rights of stillbirth babies or your situation. And we have Sam. Why don't you go ahead next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha Banerjee, Executive Director of Push for Empowered Pregnancy. Like Anna and Jill, I am a lost mom. My first daughter, Alana, was born still 2 days before her due date in 2013. And I have been lucky enough to go through 2 subsequent pregnancies, a boy and a girl. My son and second daughter were both alive and well, 3 and 7 now. And I came to this issue because I don't want to see what happened to us happen to any other family. We feel really strongly pushed. Every family deserves to be empowered with all the information they need to know that if God forbid their baby is stillborn, that they and their providers did everything in their power possible to give their baby the best possible chance. And today there are 23,000 families every year in the US who cannot say that. And that is just not fair, and it needs to change. So we're really, really excited to have Jill here with us tonight because she is basically the leading expert in the legal field about rights of stillborn babies, and has a really great perspectives about understanding the different incentives that are pulling doctors in different directions when it comes to making decisions, and what families avenues they have available to them to hold anyone accountable after their child's death. So Jill, I'm going to pass it off to you. Jill's also one of our PUSH board members, so I'm very, very excited to have her there in that role as well. So Jill, yeah, please take the floor.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Anna. Like you already know, my name is Jill Lens. I am also a stillbirth mom. It's going to be 5 years this summer. I'm hitting my 5-year anniversary that Caleb was stillborn. He was my first boy. I have 2 girls older than him. And then Caleb, I was 37 weeks pregnant. And I woke up one night and I felt uncomfortable, and not in pain, but uncomfortable. And, that was it. A couple hours later, we found out that he had died. I have been fortunate. I did have 1 baby after Caleb. Brandon is now 2. And after I went back to work, I'm a law professor. I'm a lawyer. I'm a law professor. And after I went back to work, after Caleb died, I, couldn't stop thinking about stillbirth. And I was like reading all these studies and thinking about all these laws. And I asked my therapist, is this healthy? And she assured me that for my personality, it probably was healthy. So I devoted myself sort of professionally to this also. And just trying to figure out the different ways that laws affect stillbirth prevention, the different ways that laws affect the experience itself of stillbirth, the different ways that laws affect what society thinks stillbirth is. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's what rights the parents have, and like how we treat a stillborn baby versus one that dies shortly after birth, right? This is really what I focused on now for about 5 years. And yeah, I'm happy to be here and get a chance to talk about our babies and the law a little bit.
So before you actually were just a lawyer in general, like what kind of law were you practicing?
Oh, goodness. I haven't been a lawyer for a long time now, to be honest. I've been teaching for like 12 or 13 years. So when I still did practice, I was in St. Louis. It was a long time ago. It was like business stuff, businesses suing each other, business litigation, appellate litigation. So nothing at all related to anything I do. And before Caleb died, also like what I cared about professionally was very different. Like I focused on damages and a certain kind of damage called punitive damages. Like that's what my research was about and my articles are about. And none of that seemed very important after your kid dies.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you feel after your loss that you wanted to proceed with any legal action? Is that kind of
no, I mean, Josh and I, my husband and I are both lawyers, like we met in law school however long ago. So certainly, I mean, the thought crossed our mind. And it was more of the when I was uncomfortable and the on-call doctor, there was no urgency, right? And there's those thoughts if we had gotten there 2 hours earlier, right? Like, so there was those thoughts, of course. And honestly, she didn't actually even tell me to come in. We just came in because we had childcare that night because my brother was in town. I mean, otherwise we probably wouldn't have, because like we couldn't have figured it out with the girls. So yeah, I mean, we had those thoughts. I also knew though in the back of my mind, like how some damages worked in Texas. And I knew that for a medical malpractice action, sorry, I'll say med mal for short. I knew that there's a cap on how much you can recover in Texas, and it's $250,000. So even as my husband and I were like, and we didn't talk about it a lot, to be honest, because there really wasn't, we didn't really think there was anything to do, but like I knew in the back of my mind, I'm like, how would we even find an attorney? $250,000 is so minimal. So
a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, $250,000 is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. But it's also not when you're thinking about like your kid dying.
Somebody, yeah.
Right? Exactly. And then I should be better about like, because you remember attorneys get paid based on how much you win, right? So usually attorneys take 1/3 of what you win, and 1/3 of 250 isn't a ton compared to what attorneys can make for other cases. And another huge problem with stillbirth cases is attorneys are scared of how are they going to prove what the doctor did caused the stillbirth. Okay. Right. So stillbirth cases are also going to be very expensive because you're going to need like expert witnesses. So that costs more money. So we're taking more money out of that total damages recovered too. And there's so much inaccurate belief about how these things are inevitable.
Right.
So like, how as a lawyer, how would I prove to a jury that actually this was the doctor's doing as opposed to just an act of God, I guess, although I never like to think about stillbirth as an act of God, but you guys know what I mean, right? That it was not somebody's fault. And so when we're talking about how am I going to prove this, experts are really expensive. And $250,000, 1/3, it's just, and I'm not blaming like lawyers at all for not being interested. Like they need to eat, right? Like they need money to support their family too. So when they have a choice between a stillbirth case, which is only going to be $250,000 versus another case that has like tons of medical expenses or tons of lost wages, all of that is completely recoverable under Texas law. Like the lawyer's going to pick the case that's more profitable.
Yeah. Right? I'll tell you that actually happened to us because we lost our son in California, and I spent months probably looking for a lawyer. I called literally everyone, and thankfully one of them was kind enough to even answer my call or call me back. And he said, I understand, and I feel really sad that I can't take the case, but I want you to know why, because you're going to keep getting no's. And I think you deserve to know the reason. And so he did exactly like explain that information, because he said, it's going to be really hard to prove that it was your doctor's, even though I delivered and my son was alive going into that. And also, obviously perfect pregnancy, like a lot of us had, full care, we're like, where did they not see this coming. It was really hard to just the grief, you're like, I need someone to pay for it, whether it's 5 cents. I just want them to admit that it was their fault, and I'm like, I would literally pay whatever fee, but he's like, it would just go on forever. And, they have more money with their insurance and they would just fight you until it just died. And they would also make you go through, the trauma of reliving that loss. And, I've had this conversation with other mothers, and I felt bad discouraging any of this, but I said, I want you to know what I was told. And that way, you know what you're getting into, because they will try to make you look like the one that messed up. And like, maybe you should have reported it a day ahead, like they can turn it on you. So, and do you want to go through all that, emotional trauma in court and everything, if it ever got that far? But
and that's another part. Like, you're going to have to not only convince the jury that the baby's stillbirth wasn't inevitable, you're also going to have to discount the pregnant person's possible causation, which we don't. I mean, I was reading a grief book recently, and it's really good. And there was just a page or two about how we blame even though we don't realize we're blaming, right? Like, when something bad happens to someone else, we want to differentiate ourselves, like, oh, that couldn't happen to me, right? So even when we don't like realize we're blaming, right? Because we just want to differentiate. So, I mean, it's such a natural human inclination. So that's another thing you'd have to do with the jury. Yeah, it's a very difficult decision.
And I feel like also, since I didn't get a cause of death from the hospital, they admitted no fault. They absolutely wouldn't talk to me about what happened. I had like one meeting and where they just blew it off pretty much every single question I had about the resuscitation and everything. So I had nothing, and they knew that. And I think that's partly also why I feel like I was talked out of autopsy, even though, you hope that they would never do it for that reason. But the NICU doctor who was supposed to resuscitate came in like very soon after and told us about autopsy option and how it was, and described it in a manner that really made me not want to do it as a grieving parent, and I think, like, in a way, I'm always wondering, is it because she didn't want me to see that he was absolutely perfect, genetically? So I didn't have that as far as if there was any case, So I don't know. I have that very complicated rage still.
And didn't you tell me, Anna, too, that like, and then when you were trying to talk to attorneys too, they mentioned the lack of an autopsy as being another problematic hurdle, right? When they're trying to prove causation. And yeah, there's definitely, I mean, there's studies out there about how doctors talk to us about autopsies, and it's awkward, of course. And, it's the worst moment of our lives, and we're supposed to make this big decision. And you think about your baby, and I mean, doctors aren't out there telling us, hey, this is the gold standard for figuring out what happens.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, there is a little bit of a conflict of interest there too.
Yeah, who should be telling us that? I feel like it should be someone not involved in the death, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, is there anyone
You can't walk in here after you let my son die and tell me not to find out why.
It's a strange, and on in defense of doctors too, like, they also don't know how important it is.
Yeah.
Right. Like, no one is training them on the value of fetal autopsies. Right. And they don't see enough stillbirths to have to learn about it. So they can't tell us how important this is, because they don't know. And they don't even know how it works, right? Like, so they can't even explain to us how the autopsy works, because they don't know.
Yeah.
So I think there is that conflict issue, Anna, but also more positive, like they don't know.
Yeah.
They need,
and
more
even if they did, we don't even have enough qualified, placental pathologists who can who can even get answers, get the proper answers in this country trained. That's one of the things they're trying to address with the Shine for Autumn Act. Is even just having, not only do we need more parents to be getting autopsy, placental pathology, all the whole battery of testing after a loss, because they deserve answers and because we need that information for research. But even if we got everybody to do it, there aren't enough professionals to actually execute on
Well,
that.
maybe though, if we had more demand, there would be more professionals, right? Like, I mean, they could be related there. Yeah, and
I
that's
think
actually
the worst part is that lack of accountability for me meant that there was no improvement of care after our loss,
Yeah.
because no one would admit that something happened there and let's improve that. It was just like a stab in my heart when I left, like, well, who knows how many babies are going to follow Owen, and they did nothing to even try, to understand it. And that's the worst part. I don't think parents are after money, no amount of
No,
money would help us.
exactly. That was all I wanted after my lawsuit. I just wanted to hear that they were going to do better in the future. Like, I needed to know that my daughter's life meant something, that it meant that this was not going to happen to the next person that walks into the hospital. And I could not get that. I could not get that from my providers.
Well, and it's hard though, y'all, because it's so rare, right? Like, how many like full-term stillbirths is a doctor really going to see?
Yeah,
Exactly. The average doctor sees like one a year, maybe.
I mean, I was in Waco, Texas at the time, and my doctor said I was the first term stillbirth she'd seen in 10 years.
Wow.
Right. So, and it's, it's just not, I mean, yes, of course I want, treatment to be better and hopefully prevent this in the future, but also like on the priority list of like what doctors are looking out for, right? Like, it's just
The bottom of the priority list.
I mean, it's a devastating injury, but it's so rare.
Yeah.
Well, I have a good
It's
question.
way too common, but it's so rare. Like, how did those both happen, by the way?
Yeah, exactly.
So we have a question. Can you explain why it's difficult to get providers to do things outside of standard of care because of the litigious nature of obstetric care? This comes up a lot.
Every time a doctor does something outside of the standard of care, the doctor is dramatically increasing the chance of liability if there's an injury due to that departure from the standard of care. Okay. The way med mal liability works is it's very attuned with what we call the accepted practice. So like, what's the accepted medical practice here? Okay. And I mean, juries are told to listen to what the experts say, and the experts say, well, this is what we do in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And if a doctor deviates from that, that is trouble from a liability perspective.
Yeah.
Even if he was trying to save that baby, even if
Yep.
he was doing something new, research or something.
Yeah, let me be less abstract, okay? If they're not supposed to induce us before 39 weeks, right? A doctor might be worried about stillbirth and want to induce at 37 weeks. That induction at 37 weeks just because of a random worry of stillbirth, right? Like that violates the standard of care. Okay. So if that baby is hurt in some way due to that induction, that is almost guaranteed liability because the doctor did something inconsistent with the standard of care. The doctor is always much more protected if the doctor keeps with the standard practice of what we do in this situation.
Yeah. So like backing up a little bit, just in case, I don't know if everybody knows like the context. When it comes to, the likelihood of getting sued as a doctor, obstetricians are the most likely specialty after general surgery. They're almost certainly going to get sued at some point in their career. So this is something that they're very, very aware of, and they pay the highest malpractice insurance rates, I think, in the entire medical industry. It's something, it sucks, but the honest truth is that it's something they have to be aware of, and they have to, be taking into account, no matter how, golden their heart is. You can't practice medicine, right, if you lose your medical license because you've gotten sued. So if you want to continue taking care of patients, you want to continue delivering babies and making families happy, like, you need to protect yourself that way. Like, you can't, like, nobody faults doctors for that, right? It is unfortunately, it's the way our system is. So they're in situations. So like Jill was saying, like, take a very specific, let's say you have a mom who's 36 weeks pregnant, and she's had a few incidences over the last few weeks of altered fetal movement. She's saying something doesn't feel right. What's the standard of care in that case? The mom comes in, the mom says, something doesn't feel right. My baby's not moving as normally. She comes in, they do an NST, a non-stress test to check the baby's heart rate. They're not seeing any decelerations. They're not seeing anything, they get a reactive strip. The mom says, I still don't feel right. They're like, all right, let's put you on the ultrasound. They do a biophysical profile. They do BPP. The baby, does all the things that they're looking for, and the baby's fine. But the mom's still feeling something's not right. At this point, the standard of care is that you say, well, we don't see anything wrong. Go home, let us know if something changes, and then, so from that point, right? So there's a few ways, if you think about the ways this scenario can pan out, one way is that the doctor follows the standard of care, sends the mom home, and everything's okay. She stops feeling that way, 2 weeks later, baby comes on their own, and they're happy. And there is about a 99% chance that is what's going to happen in any case, right? Just looking statistically, stillbirth is a less than 1% chance of happening. It is far more common than we think, claims more children's lives than prematurity, SIDS, car accidents, drowning. You all heard me give the spiel. But it is honestly, we look at the overall numbers, it's less than 1%, right? So the doctor does follows the standards of care, does nothing, and just rolls the dice, 99% chance everything's going to be fine. So let's say, but then so they follow the standard of care, and let's say they fall in that 1%, right? They fall in the 1%, the baby is still, they come back the next day, no heartbeat, the baby is born still. And then looking at the potential cost to the doctor there, as Jill and Anna both found, in many states, and Jill, I don't know if you know how many, the caps, like what you can sue for as a parent, is you cannot sue, I think, for the child's life. You could sue only for emotional damages as the parents, and that in many cases is capped around $250,000. Did I get that? Is that correct, Jill?
It's just the mother, I believe.
It's a hot mess, y'all. I can't simplify that. It differs based on the state.
Okay.
And Anna is right that in some states it is only the mother. Right. So California is one that only the mother can recover. Florida is one that only the mother can recover. And California is only the mother, and med mal damages, non-economic damages, are capped at $250,000. Yes. $250,000.
Okay. So basically, in that case, if the doctor does nothing, right, or if the doctor follows the standard of care, they've got a 99% chance of everything being just fine, and a 1% chance of, maybe getting sued for $250,000. So let's say this doctor is like, okay,
but actually
doesn't feel.
We don't even have to go that far. As soon as you said that the doctor complied with the standard of care and did what was normal at that, he has zero risk of being liable.
No what the outcome is.
He's not thinking about damages at all, because complying with the standard of care is such protection.
And I've actually been reading recently with for Care for Moms post that they do the same cap for women, like maternal mortality. It said 250,000. I was like, oh, is that
y'all, the 250 is only on emotional damages. Okay, so it could be, in some states that's like the lost relationship, or it could be emotional distress. But if an adult dies, like a maternal mortality, there would also be like a ton of economic, what she would have made in her job and stuff. So that would not be, economic damages are not limited.
Okay.
And then so let's take the other scenario, right? So let's say you have this 36-week mom, and the doctor is like, something doesn't seem right here. My gut's telling me I need to deliver this baby because I'm afraid if I don't, they're gonna be stillborn. That is not following the standard of care, right? This is a doctor being brave and doing what they think is the right thing. So let's say that 36-week baby is born and ends up in the NICU. And, at that time, there's like a 99% survival rate in NICU. But there's still probably like I looked up the numbers earlier, about a 7% chance of there being some sort of like morbidity, whether severe or mild, whether it's a developmental delays or, long lasting effects, right? So looking at that scenario, so the doctor intervenes, even though standard of care tells them that they shouldn't. And then the baby either, say they end up in the NICU and they end up, then they die, or they end up in the NICU and they end up in the long term. What is the doctor looking at then?
Keep them alive. Sadly, when we're talking about kiddos that young, the damages are always going to be much more for alive with a long-term illness than dead. But that's not just a stillbirth thing, to be honest.
Everything.
Okay, so the doctor who violates the standard of care.
To do the right thing and try to save a child's life. Let's be clear.
Or in tort law, I would say the doctor who violates the standard of care. First off, you can stop right there. Violation of standard of care is almost automatic liability. Okay. And if that baby is injured in some way and has the NICU stay and has any sort of like longer term, like those are economic medical expenses. Those are not capped in any way, and they are not cheap.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, give us some numbers. Like, what are some?
I have no idea. I don't know how much NICUs cost, right? But they're crazy expensive.
For anybody watching who had a NICU baby, how much does it cost to have your baby in the NICU for a few weeks?
I have no idea. I mean, as a stillbirth mom, all I think about is how I would have gladly traded a month in the NICU for a stillbirth, right?
I would have traded a month in the NICU and a lifetime of developmental delays.
Yeah, I mean, so but the point is that if it's medical expenses, that's not emotional, right? So there's no cap, right? I'm not
downside.
Yeah, I am not this cynical. I don't think doctors actually think like this. Okay, I'm not this cynical. But to be honest, cost benefit.
From a logical perspective, why would they ever intervene?
If I'm a doctor and they wanted the patient wants induction at 37 weeks. I mean, if I was to run the numbers in my head, I would much rather risk the stillbirth.
Exactly. You roll that dice and hope you get 99 out of 100, right?
I'd much rather risk the stillbirth, because even if it happens, damages are limited. And also, though, I complied with the standard of care, so I'm not going to be liable in the first place.
Exactly.
Okay. But if I induce early, I'm for sure liable, and probably not insignificant.
Higher chances of there being something, of being some kind of damage.
And I will add one thing that I think is really unfair for doctors. Okay. And this puts them in a bind, and it's crap that the law is like this. Okay. Even if the patient says, I consent to this 37-week induction.
I'll put it in writing.
I will put it in writing. Right? I am okay. I understand this is a risk to my child. I accept that risk, right? So even if the patient gives what we call informed consent, that is not a defense if the patient later sues the doctor for med mal, because the courts say you can't consent to med mal. And I think that, that's not fair for doctors.
It's not fair for doctors at all. No, and that's exactly why we wanted to have this conversation, right? Because, we too are not cynical enough to think that doctors are doing these calculations in their head, right? But just to point out how backwards the system is, right? This system is completely incentivized, not the way that it should be, right? We should be incentivizing doctors and the medical system to keep our babies alive. And right now, that is not the way it's set up. I know that doctors, they go into medicine because they want to save lives. And I know that is what our OB's goals are, right? But from a logical perspective, any doctor who is looking at it, like, the numbers do not work out.
Yeah. And I think insurance companies think about the numbers.
And the insurance companies are definitely thinking more about the numbers than
way more than any doctor does.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are.
I do not, even though I'm telling you what the math is, I do not think any doctor thinks like that.
No.
Okay. But if you look at how it's set up,
Look at how it's set up.
and it's not, and y'all, it's not just a stillbirth thing. Like how we do damages for deaths of living children is jacked up too. Okay.
I was going to ask about that next, actually.
Yeah,
If it was different.
It's not, well, I mean, most states treat stillbirth just with the exact same legal claim that you would get for the death of a living child. Not California, Anna, but Anna, excuse me. Not, but most states treat it exactly the same. But the way we do damages for a family member dying, like automatically for kids, it's going to be way lower than for adults.
So
And it doesn't match sort of what we see as the cultural tragedy of the death of children. Although I would also add cynically that we say that more than we actually act on it.
Yeah.
As far as like how we value children and whatnot. So it's not necessarily just a stillbirth thing.
But it's our legal system.
Some of what
Valuing the lives of children. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This wasn't going to be like a happy talk though, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Jill, when you
having
say that
children.
it has to be part of standard of care. So now that ACOG is saying 37 weeks are acceptable date for induction if you have like a high anxiety patient. So would that be now it's safe for them to do that?
I thought that was only in a subsequent pregnancy post stillbirth, not
Yeah, I believe so
pregnancy.
too.
Yeah, definitely in a subsequent pregnancy post stillbirth. I'm not. I've not looked at it.
I've looked at it, but not recently. But I'm like 99.9% positive that it assumes a pregnancy.
So does that cover them though for, I guess, a stillbirth parent then? Is
Yeah,
that
if you're in a pregnancy after loss and you want a 37-week induction.
we followed ACOG's new guideline?
I'm sorry, you're going to get a way complicated answer for me. If you read ACOG's bulletin, and mind you, it's been a while. It says it's okay to induce at 37 in a subsequent pregnancy post stillbirth if the birthing parent gives informed consent, like understands all the consequences. Okay. I pause at that, and I've actually been meaning to ask a colleague at that, because I don't know if that's changing the standard of care and making it not med-mal anymore, or if it's attempting to give an informed consent defense to med-mal, which courts would probably not be okay with. So it's a more complicated question. I mean, on a much more simplistic level, should doctors feel more comfortable inducing at 37 weeks post stillbirth? Yeah, I certainly hope so. But I don't know exactly what I would call the legal sort of interpretation of what ACOG did, to be honest.
You know, we don't know if that's even been tested, right? Like, do we, you know of any cases that somebody in a subsequent pregnancy?
And to be honest, I mean, the baby's probably fine, right? So there's not going to be a lawsuit anyway.
Yeah.
Or even if the baby's not fine, just because someone like theoretically could sue. I mean, look, if it was me and I said, do this, I mean, I don't think I'd turn around and want to sue. Like
especially as a stillbirth parent, right? When you know the alternative is your baby might have died, like you'll just be grateful for whatever you get.
I mean, and not everyone is litigious, right? Like far from everyone is litigious. Overall, overwhelmingly, people who are hurt overwhelmingly do not sue, right? They assume it's their own fault, or they just don't want to deal, or they just don't think about it. So, I mean, I'd be surprised if we really even get lawsuits from that situation if something happens with the baby at 37 weeks.
Pregnancy. Yeah.
I mean, I was
true.
over the moon happy when my doctor induced me at 37 weeks for my next guy. So
I have a question from our audience again. It says, what is the best way to work with our providers to get the care we need when we are up against the pressures of this high risk liability?
Yeah. I mean, that's always the question we have, right? We see this a lot with from the Measure of the Placenta team, and with EPV, with doing estimated placental volumes, because this is a new technique. It has not been totally proven out in research yet, but looks very promising. It has very little downside risk, except that it's giving doctors and patients more information, which in some cases might make them want to induce, prior to 39 weeks, prior to what the standard of care guidelines say you should. So it kind of, again, opens up exactly that door. So we see a lot of parents, especially those in subsequent pregnancies, and especially those who have had stillbirth due to small placentas, going to their doctors saying, I want you to measure my placenta. And the doctors are saying, I can't do that until ACOG tells me I can. What are your rights as a parent in that situation? Like, if you want your doctor to perform something on you and they're saying that they can't, and we know that the doctors have very good reason for saying this, what can you do about it?
You can't.
Nothing, right?
Go find another doctor
Find
really
another doctor.
your only option, because you know how OBs love to take new patients at 34 and 35 weeks, right? So that's plausible. But I mean, I don't think there isn't a right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what we found too. I mean, we've developed some strategies that we've worked with, parents, basically putting your request in writing, for example, trying the informed consent thing, even though we know that legally that wouldn't hold up, but at least it would help maybe reassure your doctor that you don't have intentions to sue them and you understand what you're asking for. Going to, like we always say, vote with your feet, right? Go to another provider, go to a third party ultrasound if you can afford to pay for, one of those boutique ultrasound places, and see if they'll do it for you. We never know what to tell patients to do, honestly.
And this is so unfair too. It's so unfair for so many reasons, but like, so much of our solutions are about us, like, demanding things, right? Or, with my subsequent pregnancy, it was like, I'm going to look you in the eye and I'm going to make you say no to my face, right? Like, and I can get away with that. But far from every pregnant person can do that, right? Like, it just,
you don't even know if you need to be doing that. You don't understand. Like, we don't know, we could have a stillbirth because we're being told everything's perfect. So we're not in that zone yet. We realize how horrible it can go, and no one's going to answer to us even.
and
It's just
doctor
gonna happen, and they're going to push us out the door and say, we're sorry, have another baby.
Exactly.
And that's not okay. And actually, I want to throw in the comment here, which I think is really important to highlight, that it's really unfair that we have to have loss to now have preventative actions and measures such as a 37-week induction if it might be needed. Only say that that's for the lost families. I would never want that to happen to anyone first before they get the care that they should.
You shouldn't have to pay for the best level of care with your child's life.
No.
Which is what it comes down to. And to Jill's point, yes, it is a lot different for, a white, privileged, educated mother to make demands of her doctor than it is for a woman of color, than it is for somebody who doesn't speak English as their first language, than it is for somebody who's coming from an underprivileged background. First of all, just to feel entitled enough to make the demands is one thing. That's one thing. And then second, the reception that you can expect to get. We know from our experience how hard it is to advocate for yourself and your baby, even when you have every resource at your disposal, even when you've been through a loss and you understand the stakes, right? To Anna's point, if you don't even know that stillbirth is a possibility, you would never think to push for any of these things. You just trust that the system is designed in such a way to get your baby here safely as often as possible. But we know that is not the case, right? And we also know that if you are a Black woman and you go to the doctor making the same demands that me or Jill or Anna might, that you're very likely to get a very different response than we are. And that is not okay. That is not okay. And that is causing mothers and babies to die every day in this country. And that is something we need to do something about. I don't know what. Jill, do you have any
Jill, how can we
ideas?
fix it? No, I do have a question for you, Jill. As far as like legislative action, we are always pushing new bills. Right now is the Shine for Autumn Act, which will eventually hopefully get us a little bit further on this. And so is there any other thing we should be pushing? I mean, we don't even have protocols for stillbirth prevention, period. So of course they aren't following anything. Like every hospital, every doctor you go to will tell you something different if you come in with a reduced fetal movement, or they don't even tell you to be kick counting. You know, they don't tell you why you would be kick counting if they even mention it. If they happen to give you the brochure, like apparently I got the first time I was told I was pregnant and then never got brought up again. And yeah, if I called the ER, they told me to eat a meal and come in another couple hours, even though I already told them I had been worried and it was already a couple hours of kick counting and not much action. So that's the problem, is the reaction. Like we can train everyone. We've been talking about kick counting to everyone. We talk about count the kicks. We are empowering the families with information, telling them stillbirth is happening. But if the doctors are not on the other side of it, in the ER, whoever answers the phone, telling patients, come on in, this is the protocol and this is what we're going to do. And then, you know, over there in the UK, they're already doing these baby bundles, saving babies' lives. Like they're actually reducing stillbirth with the protocol. So why can't we even get that piece going? Like, what is that? What are we asking? We're just asking for a standard of care, really. What is the standard of care if you're not including stillbirth prevention?
Well, first off, I have to add to that too, a more recent example that I am freaking horrified that OBs aren't talking about COVID vaccination and stillbirth. I don't even, I can't even like say word. It's so distressing. It's not, everything's not fair. The UK has government run health insurance. They have a government run medical system. Okay. You can go through the government to get medical care changed if the government runs the medical system. Also, guess what? When there's stillbirth related malpractice issues, guess who gets sued in the UK? The government. Yeah. It makes them care more, right? We have a much more complicated and inefficient system. We can't go to Congress and get stillbirth prevention put into medicine, nor would I want anyone in Congress regulating anything with respect to stillbirth, right? We can't do that here, right? We have to, if we want something changed in medicine, we have to go through the doctors, and we all know that that is not easy. As far as like things that legislatures could do for us, though, that I think would be very helpful. Yeah, the Shine for Autumn Act is obvious. We have such problems with how we gather research on stillbirth in this country, and state run, actually, I wish we could do it federally, to be honest, but like any registry to gather data on stillbirth instead of relying on fetal death certificates would be hugely helpful, right? I also am trying to think of ways that like we can just support parents who have been through this. And practically, I really do think tax credits can help on that front. Yeah. Stillbirth is expensive. And if you can give parents a little help, right? The same help that they would get had their baby died 3 minutes after birth. Yeah. Right? Because that baby who survived 3 minutes is a dependent on your federal taxes, and you get a benefit. But if your baby died 3 minutes before birth, as if doesn't exist. Yep. Right. And I have a problem with that because the purpose, well, at least one of the purposes of tax credits, child tax issues, is that kids are expensive. Well, guess what? You spend the exact same amount on the kid who dies 3 minutes before birth and 3 minutes after.
More. Yeah, the very our children.
So I don't know. I'm starting to really think about like practically how can we help? And tax credits is one thing that could do to help. Another thing that I think would be huge is doing more for mental health care access.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know exactly what that looks like, but like people need access to therapy
Yeah.
after this. And especially to bring up diversity again, like support groups are great, assuming there's one by you. But there's also evidence, there's studies out there that Black women do not benefit from support groups, right? So we can't just like lazily just recommend a support group to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. I expect that's going to work.
And we need to think about how to get help to people.
Yeah.
Right. Like
paid
I've been in therapy for 5 years now, right? My husband went to therapy. Our oldest kid went to therapy. Again, privilege, right? And everyone should have that access.
Everyone should have that access. I've heard just such horrific stories from people who had a stillbirth, and then, their husband was back to work the following Monday. Liz on our team, our director of one of our co-directors of communications, her daughter was born still, and she was denied her maternity leave.
Yeah.
Like as if she went through a traumatic birth that required physical recovery time, and they told her, no, you don't get your time off because you didn't produce a baby.
And again, this is so hard in our country because we're so backwards on so many things kids wise, right? Like I don't even bother to even like think about a possibility of paid leave for stillbirth because we don't even do it for living kids.
We don't even do it for living kids. Exactly. Right? They're not going to give it to us for the ones who die.
I'm not like, I look at New Zealand, like, look at all these other countries, and like I haven't even bothered to research because we are so far from that here, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have bereavement leave. Right. In the UK, they have a fund that if your kid dies, you can get help with funeral expenses, and they apply it to stillbirth. And it's just like, we are so far away from that. But again, it's not even like sadly, I don't know if it's even worth trying to do here because we don't even do paid parental leave after the birth of a living kiddo.
Yeah.
So, oh gosh, now that just really all got me depressed.
I know, you're supposed to give us solutions.
No, okay.
But there are things we can do though, right?
And actually, what can we do?
The tax credits are a good start.
So let me tell you, the PUSH team, we have a fantastic set of legislative leads who are working very hard to make it as easy as possible for parents to start stillbirth tax credit bills in their states. There's probably about 6 or so that are active right now. There's a couple more that we have teams here working on, but there are many, many more states where this hasn't even started. And we're making like a toolkit. So if you go on our website, pushpregnancy.org, and you go to the legislative page, or just contact us, or send a message on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you are, we'll put you in touch with people who can give you the tools you need to go to your state representatives and say, we need a stillbirth tax credit in our state. And it's pretty simple, honestly. It's just a lot of repeatedly calling legislators in your state to remind them to, hey, this is an important issue. Can you please look at it? So anybody can do that. That's one thing. So that's how you can help on that one. How about what else did we talk about? The standard of care. So that's another initiative that PUSH is working on. And again, as Jill said, this is not through legislative measures because doctors very understandably don't like being told how to do their jobs by politicians. I think we all can empathize with that.
Nor would I want a politician
telling how to do their job. So what we are doing is we are going directly to ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists. That's the body who sets the standard of care for all pregnancies in the US. And we have the contact information from the people who are on the committee who actually meet once a quarter to set the standard of care. And we are sending them letters in the mail every couple of days for the next year. And there's about 40 people getting a letter every 3 days for the next year saying, hi, I'm a stillbirth parent. My child's death was potentially preventable. Why aren't we making this a priority the way they have in other countries? We need to see change. And it's working. I mean, we've had a couple meetings so far with people who are very high up at ACOG. We've agreed to put it on the agenda for an upcoming committee. And, you know, we need, as parents, again, we have very few rights, as we've talked about all night, legally. But, you know, this is a free country. We have voices and we're going to use them. So we need to help keeping the pressure on. So if this is something that you would be interested in helping out with, check out, if you go to our partners at Measure the Placenta, they have a link, I think, from their Instagram page to the form where you sign up, and they'll send you everything you need. So letter, you fill it in with your name, your baby's name, you know, a short blurb about your story. We'll give you the addresses and we give you a date and you send them out there.
Another law idea. And again, not every state needs it. I mean, almost, I think 40-ish states do this correctly. But as I'm looking at, California is not one, Florida is not one. And New York actually doesn't do this in the way I think that it probably should be done either, is how we treat, like if you were to sue actually your doctor, or even like the guy who hits you in a car accident. The vast majority of states treat that stillbirth like it's the same legal claim as you have if your living child was killed, but not in California, and not in New York, and not in Florida, and sometimes not in Texas. So we got some big states with a lot of births that are not doing that in a way that reflects. I mean, I guess I speak for myself, but I think I can back this up with studies. Like, you know, I see Caleb as my child who died. Granted, he died in my womb, but he still died. And I should have a legal claim that reflects my injury. And the injury is the death of my kiddo.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I mean, those are huge states. I mean, New York, there are 900 stillbirths just in New York City every year. And we know, statistically speaking, that, you know, up to 75% of those could potentially be prevented. If we match the rates, the best rates that we were getting, that we are seeing in other countries like Japan. If we had the same stillbirth rate as Japan, we could be preventing up to 75% of the US stillbirths. And, you know, we need to be doing better. So what can we do? Like, I went for that issue in particular, Jill, the states where the legal claims, you know, the way what you could sue for is not the same as if you're
you gotta start talking to those state legislators,
those legislators,
and try to find one who's interested. And you know, it's some of that who you know, right? Like and I mean, these generally are bipartisan generally. I mean, I would suspect, you know, some of the resistance, and well, I don't know, but I mean, this does become sort of an abortion flashpoint too. I won't lie, right? Because
that is, you know, honestly, it is very much a bipartisan issue. One of the very few, but we have had success, I know, at the New York State level and now at the federal level, working with legislators across the political spectrum, which is fantastic to see. And sadly, stillbirth is common enough. You know, it's on the same magnitude of deaths as like car accidents. So the same way everybody knows somebody who died in a car accident, everybody knows somebody who had a stillbirth. You may not know it, but you know somebody who had a stillbirth. And if you go around and start asking, you'll find out. And so that's true of legislators as well. Sadly, most legislators have somebody in their family or somebody they care about who has been through something like this.
And that's how we got the stillbirth tax credit in Arkansas. Like I mean, one of my colleagues, his spouse is in the state legislature, and so I, you know, mentioned this, and she knew exactly where to take it. And it's a representative whose granddaughter was stillborn. So yes, it is sadly one of those, like, if you do some digging, you can probably find a connection. Or any legislators that's, you know, really talking about maternal mortality,
health. Yep.
Right. And you know, I think that, I mean, maternal mortality and infant mortality, to me, I think probably seem much more fixable than stillbirth. So so actually the people who are really into maternal mortality might put that sort of at a lower priority, but it should, all be together.
It is. It's a lot of the same root causes.
Yeah.
We've been building some really strong partnerships with a lot of the big maternal health orgs in recent weeks, because there's so much commonality. The things that need to be done to fix maternal mortality will also fix a large portion of stillbirths.
I will say, I think the big reason why stillbirth has this kind of funky position in all this is because people do not understand stillbirth, period.
They don't know.
And I feel like they just, bulk it with miscarriage, bulk it with like maybe there was a genetic cause, something wrong with the baby.
Mom did something wrong.
The mom had certain health issues that were just, this was unpreventable, and so I think that's why we work so hard on our awareness ends, just to talk about it. Like, we share our stories. I tell everyone who shares their story with me, like, you don't know how many babies you just saved, because someone's going to see you and say, oh my God, like that could have been me. And that looks like me. Like that person, she has the same everything as me. Like, I can't believe it. I didn't think it would happen to someone like me. And so I think that in itself is going to make people very aware of the situation not being so like rare, like we said at the beginning. Oh, it's so rare, but it's not that rare if it can happen to 23,000 people a year. And we're saying almost half should hopefully be preventable. And that's just with current standards and what they're doing in other countries. But we really feel if we put more money towards this, more attention, we could probably save a lot more. I mean, there's so little research in areas like the placenta and the cords, and actually implementing those changes now that there are, ways to do things. Like we're talking about measuring the placenta. I don't know if everyone watching us here even knows what we're talking about. They don't measure your placenta in a normal pregnancy. Your placenta is your baby's life source. I'm sure you have heard that. And you imagine they're looking at it. They're seeing where the cord is inserted, and they're, might notice something or other where the placement is, where it's sitting in your stomach, to make sure, is it anterior? Are you going to be able to feel those kicks? But other than that, they're not tracking it for you. And if you're in a normal low risk pregnancy, you're not going to get as many ultrasounds. You're going to get to the end of a pregnancy with just a couple ultrasounds, ready to have this baby, and you're thinking everything's just fine. You're not even paying attention as well to the movements, because no one even told you could have a stillbirth, and your placenta might be small and you didn't know, and it just ran out of gas. Your baby stopped moving, and all of a sudden you're in the hospital, like being told your baby just died, and that should not happen, and that's why we share what we can, because regardless, we can't save every baby, but I have had many that, come into the hospital and they say, well, thank God I saw your video. And, we went in and they had the cord around the neck, and, things had to happen quickly, but we have our baby alive. And I've had a couple save stories already, and we've only been around for less than a year. So I do encourage everyone, just share your stories.
Share your story.
It's really sad, I know, and it's hard to relive trauma, and we still grieve every day. As a parent who lost a child, I don't care if they think we only deserve $250,000 for a lifetime of grief. It's certainly much worse than anyone imagines in those positions that are putting that dollar sign there. So my husband, equally, if not more, is traumatized because he came into a murder scene of me laying on a table and my son being worked on, and he had no idea what was happening. So to say that a father doesn't even deserve a dime either, that's ridiculous.
That's what it would have been in Texas too, if it was a med mal claim, which I always think is fantastic, because I was out of it physically, and actually my doctor drugged me with something because I just wasn't going to be able to do this for birth, and so I was knocked out for Caleb's birth, and my husband was there sober for the whole thing. And the idea that I would have a claim and he wouldn't, it's just very, I guess ironic is the word. I just wanted to say one more thing too about a misconception. I was reading something the other day about and it was distinguishing between, the baby who dies after birth versus the stillbirth. And it was you never see the baby move, or you never hold their hand. And I'm just y'all don't know what stillbirth is, right? You don't know about about I mean, I know what Caleb's hand felt like, right? And
I held
and
my
yes,
hand.
you're right. Yes, you're right. I did not see his eyes open. But I held him the exact same that I've held all my other babies. I put his fingers around my finger, the exact same I have from all these other baby, all my other babies. And I think it's just so much.
9 months of feeling them move
Yeah.
inside you.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, yes, and the pregnancy, of course, too. But I just don't think, that used to be how it worked medically, that they took the baby away as if it never happened, which of course we don't do anymore. And I just don't think that anyone understands that, like, no, he was 6 pounds, y'all. He was like, he was full, he was baby. He was
Anna,
full.
do you have your own bear handy? You have Owen bear?
I usually do, and I feel like I show him too much, but my bear is my representation of how big Owen is. And I mean, like you
It's not only
said,
the same weight, but also the same length. I mean,
the length,
what,
18 and a half
19?
inch baby, it's full term baby. And yeah, I think everyone imagines like they're going to come out looking different and everything, and they're perfect. A lot of babies are like at full term, so they look like a sleeping baby that just came out and just didn't get to breathe. And yeah, it's a trauma that you live with forever. It's a child you expected in your life forever. And you being the parent, I mean, imagine bearing a child and having that child. Mine is across country now in a grave that I can't visit. You don't think that that hurts?
I'm sorry.
So I don't care what anyone thinks of us when we come out and speak about it, but we don't want anyone else to go through it. And we expect more. We expect better care, and we expect everyone to know the same information. And if we have to be the ones, to spend every day on TikTok, we'll do it. But it really should be everyone in charge as well. And our doctors, I know they do their best, but when they get busy and they have so many patients, they do need the protocol. I think they need to be told.
I mean, it's life-saving. It's been proven across medicine, right? Checklists save lives, and we don't have that when it comes to stillbirth prevention. We just don't, and we need it.
We also need to be able to hug through these things, right?
With our screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and people think you can just go on with life, but once you've been affected by a trauma like that, it happens, and it's so many a day that you just can't even sleep at night. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but
yeah, I mean, like Jill said, changed her whole course of her career, changed the entire course. I mean, I just threw away my thriving small business and flourishing writing career. Like, it changes everything. It changes everything. And it's not just the parents, it's the grandparents, it's the aunts and uncles, every pregnancy that my family goes through now is terrifying, because I was the first grandchild on both sides of the family. And this is all we know, right? Is that everything can be perfect until 1 second. It absolutely is not. So none of us have any faith that things are going to be okay. My brothers, my sister-in-laws, like they are advocating very hard for themselves, and I'm grateful for that, for all that we have learned, so that I could teach them, and that they will know that their babies were given the very best chance. But
I want to point out here also, Erica mentioned in the chat that Missouri, I believe, is getting their stillbirth tax credit going.
Oh, good.
And she said, make sure you tell your friends and family to call and write, because hers didn't respond, her local rep, but someone else's did. And that's how it got the ball rolling for them. So it's not just obviously the issue of our family. I think hopefully everyone who hears about one of these things can make a call for us.
Yes.
For other people in your lives, because it's not,
it's so simple.
One family
issue. 2 minutes.
Call them and tell them how important it is, and that somebody who's happened to, and you want to support, and that we get equal treatment.
I'm glad that's getting fixed. I don't know. I'm bad with names, and I remember someone contacted me about Missouri's, because it's still on the books. But when something changed, when President Trump his big tax credit, something changed, and the Missouri, well, it changed how, like, you do dependents federally, and then my tax law colleague explained it to me, and I didn't understand it, right? But they changed something, and then the state automatically changed something to what the feds did, and they just like straight up weren't applying what was the law in Missouri anymore. And unfortunately, though, like probably the easiest answer is to just try to get it passed again. It's a pain, right? And we did this once. But yes.
Yeah, I've heard of that they have them sometimes and they go away. And
well, and I think it used to be a child tax credit federally, but I think I need to stop talking. This is not my area. But the Trump tax cuts changed something with respect to kids.
Okay, Erica's telling us Missouri is choosing to follow the federal IRS tax deduction and not follow our own Missouri law.
There you go.
How is that okay?
I know. I'm like, and I'm trying to like help. I'm like, how are they not applying their law, right? Like, yeah.
Wow, we don't want to keep you all night, Jill, but we appreciate you so much and all you've shared tonight. And even though we don't have all the answers, we can definitely do what we're doing. And if anyone's interested in doing a tax credits push in your state, please get in touch with us. I put those links up in the chat, and you can feel free to also email us anytime, info@pushpregnancy.org, or go on Instagram, DM us. We're also on Facebook quite a bit here, and we're very active everywhere in all our personal accounts too. So we just want everyone to know we're here for you. We're fighting for your babies. We will never forget them. And obviously all our babies matter. And I hope to not have very many more joining us. So that's the other main thing we're doing is, working for prevention. And I know there's so much to share on that, but tonight was all about the law side, which it's kind of what I expected. I said in my Instagram, I don't know if we have much rights, but I'm interested in hearing, and we'll do what we can, and we just have to keep raising our voices together.
It's also about like what the law says about stillbirth, because then that affects what people think about it, right? And what the law is doing or could do to help with prevention, right? So it's not, there's just, law touches this in so many ways that you wouldn't guess, right? And law tells us what's important. If we don't have laws about stillbirth, that's part of why it's not important.
Yep.
Right. So it's, there's a lot of
right. I mean, if you can't sue for the baby, there's not much incentive for saving that child, unfortunately.
Well, and look at what we do for SIDS and like autopsies, and we're not doing that for stillbirth, right? So we have this communication that SIDS is a big deal that needs to be prevented, and then you're like, wait, stillbirth is 10 times more common, right? So it's there's a lot. I mean, it's a lot more than just like med-mal, right? There's a lot of ways that law affects stillbirth that we can think about creatively how to change.
Thank you so much, Jill, for
we'll be there.
Your expertise with us, not only tonight, but all the time. And as we mentioned earlier, Jill's on our board and she's informing a lot of our strategy. We're just so grateful to have her expertise and perspective, and especially her passion and energy. So
I'm just grateful that I started emailing with you however long ago, and you're like, hey, we have this new group, and I'm like, can you tell me about it? Can I come? Like,
we're the cool club. Everyone join Push Pregnancy. We're taking change makers right now. If you
we don't want any new members. We don't want
not members for that,
right?
But for the change makers.
You don't have to be a lost mom to join us. We have lots of we actually have several new volunteers who have no connection to stillbirth, which is
great.
Absolutely wonderful to see.
We need social media help.
We need social media help, please.
We need everything you have. Just let us know what you're willing to do to help us get our message out. We want to make sure everyone knows the prevention first and foremost. And of course, we're here to support one another too. So thank you guys for watching tonight.
Thank you. It was always great to see you.